Good evening and welcome to our weekly Bible study. We were in Numbers chapter 1 through 9 last week, and we are going to do Numbers chapter 10 and 11 this week. Last week we established that Numbers was a book about the wanderings of the Israelite people throughout their 40 years on the Sinai Peninsula. We didn't, that wasn't really God's plan when it started, but it's the way it turned out. They had been encamped there by Mount Sinai for about a year. They had received the Ten Commandments. They had been eating manna. God had been providing that for them. They had built everything and constructed the tabernacle. They had dedicated and consecrated the tabernacle. And they had cleansed and dedicated the Levites to service in the tabernacle. So the tabernacle was ready to use, the Levites were ready to serve. God's presence was visible above the tabernacle with the cloud by day and fire by night, and they were to follow God whenever and wherever He led them. So in chapter 10, God instructs Moses to make 2 trumpets. Now, their trumpets were not what we consider probably trumpets today that we would have in the high school band, more like a cornet or even a bugle. Their trumpets were long, cylinder-like instruments that just had the flare or the bell on the end. And the advantage of these trumpets, probably they could be louder for one thing, and of course there were 2 trumpets, but they could make such a clear sound. The main thing that they used was the shofar, which was a ram's horn, and depending on the size of the ram's horn, the sound would be higher, lower, easier to blow and make a blast, or harder to make a blast. And so these trumpets that God commanded Moses to make were to be out of hammered silver. And again, the sound would be much clearer, much more uniform. And so they were going to have designated uses. The sounds of these trumpets were for a specific designated use. God told him, He said, do 2 blasts when I've told you that all of the people were to assemble, and 1 blast when just the elders of the clans, the leaders of the clans, are supposed to assemble. The trumpet would tell the people when they were moving out, and the trumpet would tell the people when they were stopping. And then he would blow 1 trumpet blast, and the tribes on the east would begin to move, and then the next trumpet blast would be the Levites, and so on down the line. And then he says, when you go into battle in your own country, you are to blow the trumpet, you are to blast the trumpet, and the Lord will remember, and He will rescue you from your enemies. They were to blast the trumpet when they were doing the feasts and the festivals that God commanded. They were to blow the trumpet when they did the burnt offerings and the fellowship offerings. So we know that they were instructed to have 2 trumpets. We know when those trumpets were to be blown. And now we're actually going to begin moving. On the 20th day of the 2nd month of the 2nd year, almost 14 months after they left Egypt, the cloud lifted, and they are going to begin their wanderings. And so we are going to, well, I have a little more before we actually do the scripture, the first scripture in today's lesson. You know, and I said this a while ago, it wasn't God's intention for the people to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. It wasn't God's intention to eject Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden. It wasn't God's intention to give us different languages at the Tower of Babel. It wasn't God's intention to flood and destroy the earth and all that was in it. But when we are unfaithful, God goes from plan A to plan B, and that is to correct us. That is to bring us back to where we need to be with Him. And so we were ejected because of sin from the Garden of Eden. We were given different languages so that we could not try to be like God and to be unfaithful to God, and the flood, and the list just goes on and on. So they set out under God's leadership, under the leadership of the cloud by day and the fire by night, and they went to the desert of Paran. Now, the desert of Paran was where Ishmael settled. If you remember who Ishmael was, he was the son of the maidservant that Sarah had given to Abraham because she was childless. And that maidservant had a son. His name was Ishmael. Hagar was her name, and she had a son named Ishmael. And that is where he settled and had a family. And so over 400 years ago, that had taken place. And so probably not exactly the most friendly territory if they actually ran into those Ishmaelites. But we're going to have a little story that kind of an interruption from this, and a little story that is kind of interesting. It's brief, but it's interesting. Moses is having a conversation with his brother-in-law. His brother-in-law's name is Hobab. And Moses wants Hobab to go with them. I guess they'd been having this conversation, and Hobab says, I'm ready to go back to my land, to my people. And you go on, but I'm ready to go back to my land and my people. And Moses says, no, I want you to go to the promised land with us. And Hobab says, no, I want to go back. I'm ready to go home. And so Moses actually begs him to stay. He says, please stay. You know the area, you know where we should camp, you know the areas that we should avoid. You could be our eyes. We need you. And if you do that, then you'll share in the blessings that God's going to give to us, that God's going to give to his people. So evidently, Moses' brother-in-law stayed with them, because it says, and so they departed. But I want to use that little example to apply to our lives. Our life is a wilderness, and I said we're on that same journey. Just because we're not in the Sinai Peninsula like Moses and the Israelites were, we are still in the wilderness. Our life is a wilderness. It is a journey. It is a wandering. And our destination is the promised land. Our final destination is heaven, and that is certainly the promised land. So just like Moses, who begged his brother-in-law to go with him, we should be begging people to come along with us. We should be doing everything that we can to get them to join us on this journey, so that they too can reap the blessings that we're going to reap. That is our Great Commission, is to convince people to come along on this journey, to tell them about the Lord, to tell them about salvation, and to lead them, to have them join our journey, and to lead them to the promised land. Sometimes we're very selfish, and we just keep all those blessings for ourselves. And then in chapter 11, now they've only been on this journey for 3 days. They left Sinai, and they are only 3 days' journey into this next 38 and 10 months journey. They are only 3 days into it, and the people begin to complain. The Lord was angry. The Lord was angry with them. He was not happy with them. And so he began to burn some of the outskirts of the camp. The people cry out to Moses. Moses cries out to the Lord, and the Lord stops his punishment of them. But they really don't learn their lesson. These people don't learn their lessons very well. And so we are going to start in chapter 11, verses 4 through 9. The rubble with them began to crave other food. And again, the Israelites started wailing and said, if only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, also the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and onions and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna. The manna was like coriander seed and looked like resin. The people went around gathering it and then ground it in a hand mill or crushed it in a mortar. They cooked it in a pot or made it into loaves, and it tasted like something made with olive oil. When the dew settled on the camp at night, the manna also came down. In Exodus chapter 16, God had been sending manna since then for the people to eat every day. Every day they woke up, well, 6 days a week they woke up, and there was just this manna on the ground for them to go out and gather and to prepare. And on the 6th day, they were together for 2 days and to rest 1 day. Food would have been impossible to come by, especially for 2 million people. It would have been impossible to come by in the area where they were. But God had been faithfully sending them manna every day. And so they began to grumble again. And it says the rabble began to grumble, and then the Israelites joined them. Scholars believe that this rabble was probably the same thing that it refers to again later in another area as the mixed multitude. The mixed multitude. This mixed multitude could have been Israelites that came out with them. It could have been people from mixed marriages that maybe were half Israelite, half Egyptian. Could have been both. Could have been neither, for all we know. But that's what scholars speculate. But the reason I think that's important is to make a comparison with the church today, our church, our time. And we have people that are not totally dedicated. We have people that, even though they've seen great things, even though their lives have been blessed beyond measure, they begin to grumble in the church. And as a result, they cause dissension. And dissension breeds dissension. It's just that simple. So it may have started with those that were not totally Israelites. We don't know. But it spread to the Israelites. So as it starts with those maybe that are not totally dedicated, totally realizing what all God does for them in our churches, it spreads. It's just like COVID, it spreads. Dissension spreads. Dissension breeds dissension. And so we have to be so careful that we do not become like the Israelites. And so often we do, that we begin to grumble, that we begin to either cause dissension or join the dissension, either one. They began wanting meat. We want meat. We're sick and tired of this manna. It's sickening to us now. We've been eating it for over a year. We're sick of it. We remember the meat and the vegetables and the things that we had back in Egypt, and we're sick of this manna. Well, do they remember the slavery? Do they remember the mistreatment? They were sick of that too. Doesn't that sound like us? Doesn't that sound just like us? Oh, we miss the simpler days. We miss the days. Life was just so much better when life was simpler. I can remember when I was a little girl and life was simpler. I really don't want to give up my air conditioning for that simpler life. I don't know about you. I don't want the days back when there was only an oil lamp to read by at night. There was no television. There were no movies. There were no cruises. There was no travel. Washboards and clotheslines, milking cows, churning your own butter, flour sack dresses. Men, do you want to plow and raise a garden and butcher your own meat so that we have plenty to eat through the winter? We have selective memory. We remember the good and we forget the bad. That's a defense mechanism that's built into us as human beings. But we have to sometimes have a reality check. Were those good times, even though they were good, don't misunderstand me, they were amazing. But do we want to revert from where we are now and give up the things that allowed us or were the way it was in those good times? And that's what the Israelites are saying. We ought to just go back to Egypt. We should have never left Egypt. Did they want to stay slaves, really? Do we really want that life or whatever it was we're looking back on? And do we want to forfeit the things that we have now in order to get back to it? Manna evidently had everything that they needed, all the nutrients they needed, because we're going to go on to have some descriptions to understand that manna must have supplied everything that they needed. God wouldn't not provide everything that they needed. And it might not have been as boring a food as we think. It could be prepared in several ways. It could be ground. It could be, it said in there, what did it say? It looked like resin, and they could ground it. They could crush it in their mortar. They could cook it in a pot or make it into loaves. And it said it tasted like something made from olive oil. And like I said, back in Exodus, it said it tasted like wafers made with honey. So evidently it tasted pretty good. It settled on the ground at night, and it says it looked like coriander seeds. They didn't have to do anything to get it. All they had to do was go out each morning and gather it. So manna should have taught them to be appreciative and to be thankful and grateful for the faithfulness of God. But instead, they just had this crave. It says that the rabble with them began to crave other food. The word crave there indicates an inappropriate desire. Doesn't matter whether it's food or whether it's sexual or whether it's a covetousness. That word is also related to covet. So whatever that inappropriate desire is, God had provided them with what they needed, but they weren't satisfied with what God had provided. In verses 10 through 15, Moses heard the people of every family wailing at the entrance to their tents. The Lord became exceedingly angry, and Moses was troubled. He asked the Lord, "Why have you brought me this trouble? Why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you that you put this burden of all these people on me? Did I conceive these people? Did I give them birth? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant to the land you promised an oath to their ancestors? Where can I get meat for all these people? They keep wailing to me, 'Give us meat to eat.' I cannot carry these people myself. The burden is too heavy for me. If this is how you're going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me. If I found favor in your eyes, and do not let me face my own ruin." So they wanted more. They wanted what they wanted instead of what God had given them. He had already burned the outskirts of their camp. Did they not think that he was serious about not liking their grumbling, like that he wouldn't punish if they continued to grumble? And we're not going to find out in today's lesson what he punished this second round of grumbling with, but God grew angry with them. Everyone was complaining. It says every family wailing at the entrance of their tent. "Oh, we're sick and tired of this manna. We want meat. We want things like we had back in Egypt." And the Lord grew angry again. And when the Lord grew angry, Moses gets really worried because he knows that God will do something. And they're only a few days into their trip, and Moses is going, "There is no way I can do this. I cannot do this." And we begin to see Moses' humanity show up. But that's not a bad thing. We begin to see Moses' humanity show up. Verse 11, Moses just asks God, he says, "Why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to me? What have I done that you are so upset with me that you've put this heavy burden on me?" And then listen to this. Listen to this. I love Moses' argument. He says, "Did I conceive these people?" He says, "God, they're not my kids. I'm not responsible for them. Why are you telling me to carry them in my arms?" is what the scripture says. He says, "Do I have to be their nursemaid? Why do I have to carry them in my arms to a land that you promised their ancestors? And then in verse 13, he gets kind of to the superficial problem at hand. The problem, I can't handle this. And then he gets to the kind of the superficial but the almost immediate problem at hand. He says, where can I get meat for all these people? They're wailing. They want meat. It's not possible, Lord. Look around. Look where we are. There is no meat to be gotten. There is no meat. Look around where we are. How can I do this? And then he says, the job's just too big for me. But in verse 15, he says, if this is how it's going to be, then Lord, just go ahead and kill me now. Get me out of my misery. Just go ahead and kill me now. Don't make me keep going in this misery and then end up killing me. Just go ahead and kill me now. Moses is so human. And I love that. I honestly do. I love that about all of the great characters of the Bible. Because we're weak. We need to see that as a race, we are weak. Even these great leaders had their times of weakness. Moses had seen the miracles. He had seen God, and he had heard God in the burning bush. He had talked to God on Mount Sinai. He had seen God's finger write the 10 Commandments on the tablets. He had seen the parting of the Red Sea. He had seen manna every day. And yet he was stumped. He was looking to himself. He says, God, where can I get meat for these 2 million people? It's impossible. I'm in a desert. It's impossible. This reminds me of another story, a story where there were 5,000 people plus women and children, and they had been following Jesus and listening to Jesus, and the disciples said, hey, Master, it's getting really late. And these people are hungry. Don't you think you ought to send them home? And Jesus says, no, we don't need to send them home. You give them something to eat. And they're like, there's no way we can get all these people something to eat. In the first place, we're in a remote area. We don't even have anywhere to go get food. And then secondly, we wouldn't have the money to go get it, even if there was food available. The disciples had seen Jesus' miracles. They had seen him make the blind see. They had seen him make the lame walk. They had seen him raise the dead. But we can't feed these people, Master. We can't feed them. And then Jesus turned 5 fish and 2 loaves into enough food for thousands of people with leftovers. God was about to show Moses that same kind of miracle 1,000 years before Jesus had showed the disciples and these people his miracle. So finally, after events, though, Moses turns his problem over to God. In the last part of verse 15, he says, if I've found favor in your eyes, don't let me face my own ruin. God, if you can find it in your heart, if you can just find it in your heart, if I found favor with you, then don't let this be my ruin. I need your help. I can't do it. It's too much for me. He was frustrated, but he was honest with God. God will accept that from us. He created us. He knows. He knows our limitations. He knows our frustration. He will accept that from us. He will accept us in that condition, just like he did Moses. So in verses 16 and 17, the Lord said to Moses, bring me 70 of Israel's elders who are known to you as leaders and officials among the people. Have them come to the tent of meeting, that they may stand there with you. I will come down and speak with you there, and I will take some of the power of the Spirit that is on you and put on them. They will share the burden of the people with you, so that you will not have to carry it alone. This is a break from the meat situation just for a minute. God addresses what's Moses' real problem. He's having to carry the people alone. The load of the people by himself was great, and the Lord recognizes that. And so he tells Moses, he says, bring 70 men, sing 70 leaders, 70 elders to the tabernacle and have them stand there with you. And I will come down and I will put the Spirit on them, and they will share the burden of caring for the people with you. You won't have to carry it alone. And then our study material for today's lesson ends there. But I'm not going to end it there. You know me. We're going to take care of the meat problem, and we're going to see how the Lord responds. We're going to see what he does. In verses 18 through 23 of chapter 17, the end of that chapter, the Lord instructed Moses. He said, tell the people to prepare to eat meat. Not for a day or two, but for a month. Tell them that they're going to get to eat meat. And then Moses goes human on us again, and he says, Lord, I am standing here among this mass of people. Even if we had flocks and herds and all the fish in the sea, we wouldn't have enough to feed this crowd. And I am going to end this lesson with the Lord's reply. In verse 23, the Lord replied, is the Lord's arm too short? Now you will see if whether or not what I say will come true for you. Well, the Lord did put the Spirit of God on those 70 men, and they were able to prophesy and to help Moses carry the burden of the people. And then it says, a wind went out from the Lord and drove quail from the sea 2 cubits deep, all throughout the camp and all surrounding the camp. Quail, 3 feet deep, throughout the camp and surrounding the camp. God's arm is not short. Whatever our problem is, we need to remember the blessings and the miracles that we've already seen. Remember the blessings and the miracles that we know of out of his true and faithful word. Because God's arm is not short. Thank you.